Good morning. I'm Jen Jaksa, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Easter Sunday service of First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Massachusetts. A warm welcome also to anyone visiting us today. Our Community Matters newsletter is jam-packed with good stuff this week, so be sure to check it out. Important note that the mental health support group is meeting via Zoom tonight at 6 p.m. And then also a reminder that you just have 2 weeks left to submit your donations for this year's talent auction. Don't forget that along with services, you can donate goods, including baskets for a raffle. Speaking of baskets, enjoy this beautiful Easter morning and welcome to church.
Good morning, I'm Molly Lozeau, the music director, and I wanted to introduce the Prelude for this morning. You'll be hearing a song of the Lark by Peter Tchaikovsky, a Russian composer of many beautiful songs, including the Nutcracker. I wanted to explain quickly why I chose this song for this morning. It is, again, called Song of the Lark, and a lark, for, as long as I can tell, in Western symbolism means the morning. So I thought it would be an appropriate way to start our Easter morning service today.
Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 1. While it was still dark, while it was still night, while she could not see, while she thought death held sway, while she grieved, while she wept, while it was still dark, resurrection began. The words of Jan Richardson. Let us worship. Each week, a very important time in our worship is when we light our chalice and say the words of our covenant, the words that hold us together as a community. And I invite you to light a chalice or a candle at home if you have one. And if you know the words of our covenant, to say them along. If you don't know the words, to listen to them. And we are led this morning by a very snappily dressed Fergus Abreu.
Love the spirit of this church and service its law. This is our great covenant to to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
So, good morning, and welcome to First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so happy to be the minister serving this amazing congregation. Happy Easter. I'm so glad that you've joined us on this very special Sunday. And also, I want to say happy Passover to those of you who are observing it. Passover ends tonight at sundown. I hope it was a good Passover. So Easter, we have a lovely service for you, I think, today. And we start right off with a very special Easter hymn. It's number 269 in the gray hymnal, Lo, the Day of Days is Here. And the words will be on the screen, so sing along if you like. Next, we have two special treats for you. If you have children or youth where you are in your home or wherever you are watching, come on and bring them forward. Two things. First, a very short video sharing something that happened yesterday called a yarn storming. Our church, along with some others from the Greater Littleton Interfaith Council, did a yarn storming decoration in honor of Easter morning. And I want to thank everyone who participated in that. You'll see some of their pictures and names. I know Bev Sear and Wendy McDougall made a lot of the wonderful things you'll see. Thank you to Debbie Eston for doing a lot of the organizing. And I hope you enjoy that quick video with a little more Tchaikovsky for you. Russian dance you'll hear. And then after that video, you will see the time for all ages. So you'll want the kids to be forward to see those images too. And the story will be shared by our own Susan Palmer, who has been the chair of our Religious Education Committee for many years. Enjoy.
Good morning. I have a really nice story today called Little Tree, and it's written and illustrated by Loren. Once there was a little tree filled with little leaves, who was surrounded by other little trees who had little leaves of their own. In the heat of long summer days, Little Tree's leaves kept him cool. The squirrels would climb up on his branches to play. The mourning dove landed in him and sang her fluty song. The little tree was sure to grow up big and strong. Autumn arrived and cool winds filled the air. The wind tickled the little tree as it passed through his branches and ruffled his leaves. The air grew cold, and the leaves on all of the trees changed color, becoming yellow, red, and orange. Then one by one, the trees began to drop their leaves. But not Little Tree. He just hugged his leaves tight. "Hello, Little Tree," said a squirrel. "You're supposed to drop your leaves now." But Little Tree was unsure. What would he do without his leaves? Winter came. "What are you doing with leaves still on you?" asked the doe. The Little Tree just hugged his leaves tight. Springtime arrived, and the little forest burst into life again. The other trees grew bright new leaves. The squirrels played in their branches. Little Tree could hear the mourning dove singing her fluty song. The seasons continued to come and go. "Little Tree," quacked a duckling, "your leaves are brown. Are you feeling sick?" A fox said, "Little Tree, it's autumn. It's time for you to drop your leaves. You can do it. Ready? 1, 2. But Little Tree just hugged his leaves tight. All around the forest grew and grew. One summer, Little Tree could no longer feel the sunlight. The squirrels played high above on the broad, tall trees, and the mourning dove sang so far away that he could hardly hear her fluty song. Autumn came again. Leaves began to blanket the ground. Little Tree looked up at the other trees, at their branches reaching high into the sky. He remembered when the trees had all been his size. And then he let go. As his last leaf floated to the ground, for the first time, Little Tree felt the harsh cold of winter. But in time, something happened. Once there was a little tree. The end. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Susan. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for telling it so sweetly. And again, thank you to everyone who participated in the yarn storming, including some of you who dropped off yarn, and I don't even know who you are, but thank you all. This is a very important time in our service also. It's time for the offering. And roughly 3 out of 4 Sundays, we have an offering for the good works of this church. 1 week a month, roughly, we do a share the plate and share it with somebody else. But this week, we ask you to consider, if you're able, making an offering for the good works that we do here. We are a self-supporting congregation. We don't receive money from a denomination. In fact, we give money to our denomination. So we rely on the generosity of our members and friends to help keep us going. If you are able to make an offering this week, we invite you to send a check through the mail if you like to First Church Unitarian, 19 Foster Street, Littleton, Massachusetts, 01460. Attention Assistant Treasurer is great. Or you can go to our website and there, fculittle.org. And once you're there, you will see a yellow donate button, and you can click on that to learn about donating online if you wish to do that. And I neglected to say before, welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. If this is your first time here, please don't feel obligated at all to make an offering. Consider this service as our gift to you. But you might check out the website, fculittle.org, to learn more about us. And go down, and if you see the purple box, we call it a virtual pew card, and there, if you wish, you can fill out the form and be contacted and learn more. So thank you very much. And this morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation.
I'm very excited to introduce our offertory today. It's a special collaboration between two people that you know very well, myself and Reverend Lara. We're going to be playing together It Is Well With My Soul. It's a traditional Christian hymn sung around Eastern time, and let me read a little bit of the lyrics. The chorus goes, "It is well with my soul, it is well with my soul." And the first verse says, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Enjoy.
This morning's reading comes from the Gospel of Mark in the Christian New Testament, and you will hear the end of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Here ends the Gospel of Mark.
Molly.
We have a special song to offer you today. The choir, as always, has been working very hard, and we've been meeting and rehearsing and learning new music, and we have a special anthem to offer you today. It's called Ave Generosa, and it is by Hildegard von Bingen. We have done some music by her before. She was writing hundreds of years ago when there weren't very many women writing, or we don't have any knowledge that survives today of that. So you'll see the words in the translation on your screen, and I'm very happy to share this anthem with you that members of the church choir and I have done together.
Indeed, thank you to the church choir. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Easter Sunday has arrived. And of course, Easter Sunday is known among most Christians as the day that Jesus was resurrected from death. Many of us, even those of us who were not raised as Christians, have heard that this is the most important day of the Christian liturgical calendar. It shows that through faith, we can triumph over death. And because Jesus Christ died to take away the sins of the world, we have the Christian theology of atonement, where through the death of Jesus, people and God can be reconciled. Now, not every Christian believes this, but some variation of this is a very common Orthodox theology. And so each year, when Easter Sunday comes around, many modern Unitarian Universalists struggle to find our own way to make meaning from the story, from the passion story of Jesus's life, his last week on earth, if you don't believe in the resurrection, his last week alive, starting with his entry into Jerusalem on a donkey, followed by his famous protest in the temple. And the rest of the week included the Last Supper, which we commemorated on Maundy Thursday, Jesus's time of prayer and spiritual agony in the garden, the famous betrayal by Judas, and his capture, trial, torture, and crucifixion by the Romans. Each of the Gospels has a somewhat different account of these events and of the discovery of the empty tomb and of the resurrection itself. There are, in effect, 4 different but official resurrection stories in the New Testament of the canonical Christian Bible. The empty tomb is a fascinating part of the story of Jesus, at least for me. We have discussed before that, somewhat surprisingly, it is a woman or some combination of women who discover the empty tomb. This is surprising because women would have been seen as less reliable witnesses back in these ancient times. In the Gospel of John, that we talked about last Easter and the Easter before, actually, Mary Magdalene alone makes the discovery. In the Gospel of Luke, it's several women, namely Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and other women too, who are unnamed. It makes sense in a way that there would be so many women in the Gospel of Luke's account, because that is the gospel that has the most roles, the most importance of women in general. In the Gospel of Mark, as you just heard, it is Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome who make the discovery. And my personal favorite naming of the women involved is in the Gospel of Matthew, when it is Mary Magdalene and, quote, the other Mary who make the discovery. You know, Mary Magdalene and that other Mary. As it turns out, Mary, or Miriam, I suppose, was the most common name for women of the first century, according to scholars. In fact, approximately 25% of the women in that time and place were named Mary. So that other Mary doesn't tell you too much. But Mary Magdalene is there in all 4 gospel accounts, which is quite remarkable. I think next Easter I'm going to have to preach on Mary Magdalene. But moving ahead in the story, Mary Magdalene and some other Mary and or maybe a couple of other women discover an empty tomb in each gospel, right? The famous empty tomb of Easter morning, except it isn't really empty at all. In the Gospel of Mark, the first of the Gospels, which was written down around 70 AD, as you just heard in our reading, that in fact a young man in a white robe is there in the tomb. Some say he was an angel. Certainly the white robes suggests that he was some sort of mysterious messenger from God. The second oldest gospel is the Gospel of Matthew, written about a generation later in 85 AD. And in Matthew, an angel of the Lord is there in the tomb. In the Gospel of Luke, maybe written 5 or 10 years after that, the women find, quote, 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning. They sound like heavenly beings of some kind. And in the Gospel of John, the last gospel to be written down around 100 AD, or 2 generations after the Gospel of Mark, in the Gospel of John, Mary Magdalene does think at first that the tomb is empty, but then when she actually looks inside, she sees 2 angels, and then she notices another person in the tomb who she first takes to be the gardener, but then she recognizes that it's actually Jesus, resurrected from the dead. All I can say is, what empty tomb? There's no empty tomb. The Gospels don't agree completely on which women went to the tomb and what persons or beings they saw inside, but they all saw something inside the tomb. It's actually sort of curious to me that this is described as an empty tomb at all. Of course, Mary Magdalene and the other women go to the tomb desperately wanting and expecting to find the bodily remains of Jesus, the man that they have followed, the man that they admire and love beyond all. And the bodily remains of Jesus are not there. His body is missing. That's the empty part. For those who choose burial for a loved one, there's something really comforting in thinking that their earthly remains are there in a safe, cared for space that you could go and visit to pay respects. It would be almost unthinkably disturbing to arrive at the cemetery shortly after the burial of a loved one, to find that the body was not there, to find an empty grave. Your mind would go to all sorts of horrible places. It would be a nightmare. And in the stories in the Gospels, the initial shock and alarm at Jesus's missing body is registered as an empty tomb. One of the things I like about the ending of the Gospel of Mark, the verses I shared with you just a minute ago, is that the story ends somewhat abruptly. The other Gospels have legends and details of what happened on earth with this bodily resurrected Jesus. But the original ending of Mark does not. Some versions of the Gospel of Mark do tack on 12 more verses at the end that give a little more detail. But New Testament scholars are in essentially universal agreement that these are additions after the fact and should not be considered part of the original Gospel of Mark. So the final words of the Gospel of Mark are, "Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid." We, the readers, are left on that note, and we are left to create the rest of the story with our imaginations. We are left to overcome perhaps our own fears of death or of emptiness. But as I've noted, the tomb wasn't really empty. In our mysterious universe, nothing is ever truly empty. Science has taught us that even empty space isn't truly empty. It's our perceptions and our expectations that make things sometimes seem or feel empty. Emptiness, or our human perception of, invention of, and reaction to emptiness, is really an interesting phenomenon. Things that we perceive as empty cry out to us to be filled with something. An empty room, you want to put some furniture in it. Empty, bare walls, you want to hang something on them. An empty vase, put some flowers in it. The emptiness of the winter landscape, what a glorious relief when springtime comes to fill that landscape with new life, flora and fauna. And yet, emptiness can be powerful. I'm reminded of a quotation in the Tao Te Ching, the primary scripture of Taoism. It says there, "Clay is used to make vases, but it is the emptiness vases contain that makes them useful." The renowned and now retired Unitarian Universalist minister Carl Scoville, formerly the minister of King's Chapel in Boston, right there on the Freedom Trail walk, writes of the empty tomb that, quote, "The empty place is the first sight and symbol of Christian faith, an absence rather than a presence. And with that space and absence," he writes, "comes a sense that the world is not as simple as we imagine it. For all its laws and patterns, the world still has surprises. Who could have guessed that a community of martyrs and witnesses would come out of this tiny ragtag group of confused, abandoned followers? Who would have guessed that a man who was choked to death on a stake would become the center of a worldwide religion? Who could have guessed what would come out of an empty tomb? So writes Carl Scoville. And so it can be an absence that reminds us that the world is more than meets the eye. An absence to remind us that the world still has surprises for us. We often struggle against emptiness, and yet there's something peaceful and pure about emptiness when we stop fighting it, when we let go, like Little Tree in our story. Emptiness gives freedom. It gives the freedom of space, of room to move, of room to grow. To paraphrase, emptiness is just another word for nothing left to lose. And that is powerful. That is liberating. In some ways, Jesus' life was empty. Jesus lived a life without financial wealth. According to the Gospels, he lived a life without a wife or children, without any of the usual trappings of a conventional good life. But what came from his unconventional, empty life? It's possible that Jesus' life will be remembered as long as humans exist, possibly longer if our writings remain beyond our life as a species. And Jesus' life, especially at Easter time, is a reminder that death is a necessary part of our human existence, if for no other reason that death is necessary to create space for new life. This is the way of nature. This is the way for all living creatures and beings, plants, flora, fauna. Without death and the empty space of a tomb, there can be no resurrection. May Jesus' life, death, and the stories of Jesus' resurrection be reminders that sometimes we have to die to our old selves to bring about our new selves. May we remember that sometimes an empty tomb isn't really as empty as it first seems. It is, if nothing else, filled with possibilities. May Easter remind us of these important truths. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn this morning is another special Easter hymn. It's number 268 from the gray hymnal, and that is Jesus Christ is risen today. And the words will be on the screen, so sing along if you like.
Hallelujah.
It is time for our closing words and has become the tradition of our online worship. If you are in a room and you can safely hold hands with somebody, I invite you to do that now. Otherwise, if you are alone in a room, as I am here alone in the sanctuary, I invite you to put your own hands together and feel that warmth for our closing words. May we be those people who, like the women who discovered the empty tomb, overcome our fear of death, our dread of loss, who overcome that fear of not knowing what happens next. May we be brave enough to see that there is always something there. There is always something waiting to happen, no matter how bleak things seem. Life finds a way. Life finds a new path. The universe finds a way. Things open up into what seems like empty space, but never really is. May we be brave and bold and embrace new life. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
We end with our traditional postlude of singing the Hallelujah chorus. Please sing along or hum along or whatever along with our last song for today.